Hey, everyone, welcome to the State of the Hack. I'm Nick Carr. This is Christopher Glyer.
Hey guys.
And we're trying something a little bit different here. So we're going to give you an overview of kind of what this is, who we are, and some stuff we're going to talk about today. So this is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes, it sounds like, once a month, perhaps more. We'll see. We'll see how things go. It's 3 p.m. here, and this is our first episode, so...
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. So, cheers. And I actually think it's 5 p.m. in Greenland, so we have a really big Greenland following. Let's see. We're streaming live from the Alexandria office. I'm actually looking at a few people in the office that are hanging around. So a lot of Mandiant consultants work out of this office and doing red teams and incident response. So we're hoping in the future we can have people drop in and give a little bit of background on what they're working on. Use it as a more open and direct forum from the company and for people to kind of share. We also hope to have some official guests. I heard maybe like Alex Landstein, if everyone on Twitter seems to know him. Maybe we'll get him here. Maybe if I just mention people's names,
It'll happen.
It'll happen. So Kevin Mandiant is going to be on the next episode. I don't know if that's how it works.
On a scene
yes.
near you, yeah.
And again, we're going to hopefully get those regular casual drop-ins with people who are presenting at different conferences and working on cool work. So who's this for? I guess just, I think you're seeing a change in the company. We're trying to be a little bit more direct and authentic and give people a touch point and share what we're working on the front lines, maybe in an unfiltered way. And we don't always get everything out into the public blogs that we'd like to, so we're just kind of sharing directly here. One thing we'd like, though, is for people to use the hashtag, I guess, State of the Hack. If you have questions in the future, maybe direction and things you guys would like to talk about. This time we kind of just chose a couple topics, but we have it up here, and I think we should be able to see some feedback and trolling and all those things. So again, that's kind of what this is. I want to give you a little bit of background on who we are, and then what we're going to talk about today. So I was a computer engineer in various roles in the government and the U.S. intelligence community. Moved over to as a Fed at Department of Homeland Security for about 5 years, and working in various incident response capacities there.
You did stuff and things.
I did stuff, yes. No, and I didn't do, yeah. I won't get into that too much. I focused on analysis and incident response, though, for ICS CERT. So that group does control systems and SCADA incident response. And then I was working with, that's distracting. I was working with the IR team with US CERT on the initial OPM breach and things like that. And I had the opportunity to run into the Mandiant team and got to run into Christopher and the crew various places. And in 2014 came over to Mandiant and had been working incident response since then. And until just recently, end of last year, I transitioned to the advanced practices team, and they're working with a bunch of, I guess, Twitter personalities and people I'm looking at right now. The team is really focusing on whatever bad guys are doing. So again, some of the guys on the team: Ben Withnell, Matt Dunwoody, Steve Miller, Evan Reese, and Daniel Bohannon. Follow them all if you can find them. But we work on wherever the threat takes us. So threat-driven global analytics and hunting for targeted attacker activity, with a focus on real-time, post-compromise attacker detection and evasion. So that's me. The best intro I guess I should have given is, according to people in Vietnam who weren't pleased with the APT-32 report, I'm a spook and a nasty piece of work. So that kind of sums it up. Christopher Glyer for the better intro.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
My name is Christopher Glyer, Chief Security Architect at FireEye. My background, so I started out at PricewaterhouseCoopers doing proactive security assessment, so pen testing, red teaming, security assessments of all kinds, boring SOX audits and those things too. And in my last year there, I got a phone call and they said, we want you to fly to Atlanta. We can't tell you why. And it turned out that I needed to work on a breach at RBS WorldPay. And so this is 2008, 2009 timeframe, and it turned out that was my job interview for my current job now. Is I had to brief Kevin Mandiant with no preparation or anything else for an hour and a half on the breach, what we knew about it, everything else. I kind of caught the IR bug, and in 2009 came over. So I've been at FireEye Mandiant for 8+ years now, leading large investigations. I led the Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield breach. the state of South Carolina, their Department of Tax Revenue, that had all their tax records stolen. You name it, plus countless others that I'll never be able to talk about, or I can at least talk about at a high level, but maybe not who the particular victim was. And then I transitioned over about a year and a half ago to our engineering team, and so now I'm tasked with basically bringing kind of the ethos and mindset and experience of a frontline incident responder and trying to get that baked into our products, into the features that we have and detections and other things. So I still work really closely with what we're seeing in the field from an incident response perspective and product telemetry, et cetera, because it's important to actually use our products and tools to know how they need to change or improve going forward.
Sweet. So this is kind of weird without a response, but you can introduce yourselves later on Twitter if you watched and give us some feedback. So we mentioned a few different things we've worked on and a few particular victims. It's pretty rare that we can talk about those at specific scenarios.
Usually you can talk about the victim, but not what we found, or we can talk about what we found and not the victim. It's usually the way that I try and handle it.
Yes. And for this, we can't talk about everything, obviously, but we want to give you insight into what we're working on and kind of why we work on it. And hopefully not just be some additional kind of talking heads on the topic. What we're going to talk about is targeted activity, but directly relating to kind of three sources: incident response, our investigations. Do you want to give an idea of how many we do?
It varies, but at any time we're doing, say, 40 or 50 concurrent IR engagements, kind of around the world in like 18 different countries, I think. So we deal with financial threat actors, we deal with nation states, whether it's Russia, China, Vietnam, North Korea, you name it. We're there regardless of whether who we know the threat actors or not. When people run into issues, they call us, and so we get to investigate everybody, which is fun. We also get product telemetry. We have over 15,000 network sensors. We've got 10 million plus endpoint agents. We protect a really large amount of email inboxes in our email products. So between the telemetry that we get from our products, the telemetry that we get from our managed defense division at several hundred clients, and then the in terms of ongoing telemetry, as well as I think this year, or 2017, 2016, we did about 500 IR engagements each year. Many of which you've heard and we've been associated with, and that's probably only accounts for about 5% overall of the total IRs that we do in a year ever get publicized. So the vast majority doesn't, and so hopefully we'll be able to talk about it, or things that we're talking about here it kind of brings all of that in terms of background and experience, so that when we are talking about something, it's leveraging the kind of totality of all that.
Sweet. So we thought, without getting, we offered up suggestions, but without any particular suggestions on the first episode, we thought we'd talk about a couple things: Olympics, APT 37, and then some free stuff we've put out. Maybe we'll also get into some other targeted campaigns we've been responding to. One of the ways we even decided what to talk about is really our mission focused on community protection. We have these kind of community protection events. They're these 1 to 2 week surges where we're all doing what we do normally, but getting together, surging up on particular activity. Oftentimes things we identify ourselves, new campaigns, whether it's doing an incident response, then looking a bit more deeply for that across multiple clients and finding that activity. Or more recently, it's been a lot of these global events.
Right,
it's been
like NotPetya, WannaCry, Bad Rabbit, those kinds of ones.
All those things. I
been...
try to black them all out. It's getting difficult to keep up, I think, with the pace of global events. Needless, and not to mention actually coming out and sharing about that. So hopefully, again, we can be a little more direct in this forum. First, I guess, if we'll talk about the Olympics, I was up till 3 a.m. watching some of the women's hockey, but I don't think people need to hear about that. Let's talk about the targeting and what we did there. So I mentioned we spin these up. Some of our guys on the iSight Intel team were just worried about obviously the Olympics in general, the geopolitical climate in Russia, what was going on there, and then the proximity to North Korea and tension. So that was actually when we started looking proactively, and we kind of gave our customers a heads up, hey, we're going to be looking for this. I think the first activity I remember seeing was some of the Winter Olympic themed fishes against South Korean entities. And then there was, of course, the APT 28.
The Fancy Bear team.
Yes. Their targeting of leaking IOC letters and some old WADA data that's supposed to look like new data.
Some the luge team.
That's right. Yeah, so there's plenty of that out there. That was just data we reported on. And then say you were looking for this kind of activity in public sources and our internal sources, one of the things you might do is develop proactive detections for various things. Say you were looking for the string Pyeongchang with the Yara rule.
Right.
You may have found Olympic Destroyer, which has become pretty interesting, and some of the stories related to that. What do we call it again?
We called it sour grapes.
Okay, sour grapes, perfect. So I think Olympic Destroyer doesn't conform to our naming standards. We'll get into
I think it was too long.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, that was I guess the Olympic officials confirmed it was an attack that occurred during opening ceremonies.
Yeah, a cyber attack timed to coincide with the opening ceremonies to, impact the website of the Olympics, and may have impacted possibly like the drone display that they were going to do. So, trying to have a cyber event impact, real world events. There hasn't been any formal attribution to it, but I'd be surprised if it wasn't Russia, just given the, geopolitical climate in terms of, you look at the countries who have motivation behind that, and it probably is either only, Russia or North Korea would be the two prime candidates. The other interesting thing is the malware itself that was used. It used a couple new techniques that we hadn't really observed before, where it was a worm that would auto spread, but it would actually, once it dumped credentials from a system, it would actually hot patch itself and create a new copy. So then if you got a copy of the sample, you could actually see kind of almost a revision history from oldest to newest of which credentials it got and in which order, that it would then use to then try and either spread laterally and then delete files off of remote file shares and those things in a more automated fashion. So it's kind of I guess a play on some of the techniques that we've seen between NotPetya, Bad Rabbit, and a few other worms that targeted organizations in the last couple of quarters.
This one particularly, I don't know if you saw the article by I think Chris Bing at CyberScoop about targeting the IT service provider, and
right.
That was kind of interesting from an investigative perspective. We see service provider targeting all the time.
Right. It's a really common thing for us to see service providers be targeted just because they either have network connections to their customers, either direct or through something like a remote access connection, like a VPN or Citrix or something else. So because of the way this malware worked, and it actually hot patched itself with credentials of users and names of systems, etc. Just by getting a copy of the malware, you can then potentially infer who the victim is or who was targeted or systems, because you're going to get things like domain names or email addresses or usernames and passwords from that victim. And it always interests or surprises me the amount of files that get uploaded to VirusTotal in terms of and victims when they're obviously going through the goal that they want is they want to figure out is this known? Is there a AV signature for it or something else? And they often don't realize that by doing that researchers can basically see everything that they upload, get access to the files, and see all the other things they uploaded. So there's been countless incidents in the last several years where victims have almost outed themselves because their breach or IR security teams, who may not know how all this works, upload all these samples.
Yeah.
And so in this case, there were samples that were uploaded, likely from the IT security provider of the Olympics, Atos, and uploaded that show that they may have been infected as early as December of 2017, which, if you're a targeted threat actor, say nation state or something else, and you want to have a particular outcome on a particular day, you're not going to break in the day before that, right? You're going to break in weeks, if not months, ahead of that, and kind of be prepared so that at the time and place you're choosing, you can unleash a particular attack. I know we saw that in some of the public reporting. I know Talis had some really good reports on NotPetya and their analysis of that in terms of the timing and staging. But it's generally days or weeks or months ahead of time that the initial infection of an organization happens to when the kind of complete mission phase usually happens.
And to separate them a little bit, not saying they're necessarily connected, but it is interesting to see nation states put a lot of guardrails on their malware.
Well,
and
some more than others, right?
Yeah. I guess we can talk about the ones that do it a little bit less here in a second. But on VirusTotal uploads too, any public repository, it's been interesting to see the trend shift where I think reporters either have access to or have people that willingly provide them access. We see a lot more people outing victims through VirusTotal submitter pivots and some of those things. So it's an interesting trend. I'm curious to see where that goes. And that one was a little bit ridiculous. So occasionally you'll find some targeted activity where it tells you everything about it, including maybe the victim. And last night, again, while I was watching those Olympics,
Right.
I think I found some muddy water activity. I think targeting a specific victim, was able to get all of that publicly. So it's interesting when people upload forensic artifacts and things like that. Cool. Well, we can move on to the next item, which was APT 37. I guess a horrible transition would be like speaking of the Korean Peninsula. Like these aren't necessarily connected. We'll move to APT 37. If you saw, we released the APT 37 report this week. Garnered just a little bit of media attention, but it's just up on our blog. You can click and download it. It's not gated, so thank you to the marketing team and everyone. Again, you may notice some shifts with FireEye. I thought that was a nice thing to see. But I wanted to take a sec with you, especially who's been around longer than most, a little bit of context on the APT numbered groups and what we're doing there, and maybe
Right.
So the 5-year anniversary of something, right?
Yeah, it was I think this week was the 5-year anniversary of the APT1 report. I know for a lot of folks, I know Richard Baitlick was talking about it on Twitter, and various other folks talked about how kind of it was a watershed moment in their careers in terms of either, changing where they went. When I started, actually, we didn't have APT numbered groups. APT, the term, obviously, it's been marketed to death and everything else. So I actually don't like using the term anymore. I generally say targeted or something else is what I try and use in my personal lexicon. But at the time, obviously, when the reason for why the term came about was that the U.S. government needed a way to talk about classified intrusion sets and with, say, private industry like defense contractors. And so they couldn't say, a particular intrusion set. So instead, they came up with this kind of general purpose name, advanced persistent threat. And so I remember, I think the first time I heard the term was in like 2007. It was in like Hush Jones. It was like, have you heard about the advanced persistent threat? And so,
I was probably on the other side thinking that was super cool.
So that's like 2007-ish. And then, when I started Mandiant, we were one of the few companies that was actually doing, breaches that were by, nation states, primarily China at that point, against U.S., whether it's defense contractors. And then, in 2010, you see this big shift where they start targeting commercial entities. Anyways, there's actually an APT 0, whether you realize that or not. We are computer scientists. Numbering starts at 0. It was kind of a short-lived group. We didn't really see them very long. They were pretty crappy. I think the guy's name was Eric or something. So that group kind of died out. But anyway, so we track hundreds of different groups, just as kind of cells or linkages. And once we see enough activity, we may even name them like a temporary name, temp.hermes or something else. And that over time, as we get more experience with the group and we see them, we may actually promote them because we're confident enough in who they are, who they've been targeting, other information about them that we can actually promote them to a numbered group. So we now have numbered groups now for China, North Korea, Iran, Vietnam, and Russia are the countries that we have formally numbered groups for. And then obviously, we have kind of distinct cells and temporary name groups for countless other countries as well. And then we also have what we call fin groups. So we track tons of different fin groups as well. They're obviously less prominent, I would say, probably than in terms of the proliferation of them.
Fin 7.
Sorry, I didn't mean in terms of like how many victims they target. I mean in terms of like the sheer number of them. Right? There's relatively fewer fin groups that are out there. They may be very prevalent, right? They may hit dozens of organizations, but there's relatively I don't know how many you'd say from your experience are actively operating right now, but it feels more like I don't know three or four.
Yeah.
And I think part of the difference there is that in the fin
you
group,
just tweeted about Fin 6. Some live stuff. They're back a little bit.
Found a new technique where we saw a victim infected with Fin 6 yesterday.
Old technique, new usage.
Yeah. So I never knew that you could use Microsoft's XML binary to actually put in an XSLT. You can put any kind of scripting language. So they put JScript, obfuscated JScript, and so you see them kick off with MS XML, this obfuscated JScript for their backdoor. So anyways, new technique. But my point was around the Fin groups is, I think the reason why you see less of them is that because law enforcement can at least go after those people and are more likely to have success at arresting those people, and so you see various indictments and other things, and then you see that group maybe disappear for a while. Sometimes they come back. I know Fin1 is the group that I investigated at RBS WorldPay, where I started my career, and then they got arrested and they kind of went away, and then we came back and I investigated them again at another big investigation. And so the Fin groups are more likely to kind of come and go depending on who gets arrested and those things. Whereas nation states, they're much less likely to either get extradited or something else, and they're going to persist for a much longer time as a distinct unit. I think APT1 is maybe one of the exceptions there. Is that after we saw them at over 100 organizations, they were everywhere. It was they primarily harvested email. They weren't overly sophisticated in terms of what they did. But they were super prevalent. And then as soon as we came out with the APT1 report, the activity from that group, right, the tools they used, all the infrastructure they used basically got burned to the ground. My guess is on the back end, the people who worked for that group may have gotten, formulated new groups or
Yep.
merged back in other ones, but we haven't seen APT1 since the APT1 report effectively,
Yep.
at least in that form.
Yes, yeah, it's Fin7 continues to push people. I think hopefully next time we'll have Daniel Bohannon on our team on to talk about some tools that were inspired by one of the Fin groups. So he's talking at Black Hat Asia, I think, in a month about some of that. So side note, we kind of owe it to people, I think, to get out maybe if I say it on this live show, we'll actually do it, to get out to people explaining how we upgrade groups, how we track these different clusters, and kind of our legacy technical approach to attribution. There always seems to be, honestly, like the sour grapes versus Olympic Destroyer. People, there's actually a science around it, and I think we're planning to put out a post explaining supersets and subsets and why we draw differentiations between certain groups and how we track them. And a lot of times it's been private through investigations for a while. And if you want to bother someone on getting that out there, because I want to link to that, hit up at Barry V on Twitter. Barry Vengrick.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Come on. Who's in our advanced practices team and a long time Mandiant Intel guy. So, no, that is perfect, and it gets us into APT37 quickly. You can get most of everything there from that report. I guess the high notes are iSight had been tracking them as temp.reaper, so we have all these uncategorized groups, and we'll give them names as well during our reporting. A lot of that previous information was in our iSight Intel portal. Active since 2012, 14 is kind of the magic number for them throughout the report. 14 different exploits that they leveraged, that we've seen them leveraging kind of as soon as they've been released. One of them a 0-day. I want to talk about that in a second. But I guess we can talk about it now. They're kind of the first group that we've seen leveraging, I wrote it down, CVE 2018 4878, the flash 0-day.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key there is that the 13 exploits, so they use lots of different exploits against different applications, but all of them they had used had been known or patched, and then they were using for some period of time after. And that's not a new technique. It's pretty common for, once an exploit's publicized or someone comes up with a POC, we see lots of different threat actors, nation state, financial, cybercrime, et cetera, reuse them. But the key here is that over a several year period, you see the use of 13 other exploits, and then most recently with the Flash 0-day, they either discovered it themselves or bought it. Not sure which one, but acquired a 0-day and then used it. When it first came out, actually, I fully expected it to be, especially once it was publicized, to be reused or weaponized by the groups, and we actually haven't seen that yet. And I'm actually 2 weeks in now from when it first came out. I'm actually surprised.
In our blog we predicted that it would be used by other groups. When you look at our history of at least the 0-days, we've identified a lot of the Finfisher 0-days. 2017-0199, and what is it, 58? Oh man, I'm gonna lose credibility instantly with labs for not knowing those numbers. Some of the other CVEs though, those 0 days have been rapidly used, and that's kind of what we assumed would happen there, especially because the sample was public and on VirusTotal. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on why that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
especially with the patch, you would expect maybe people would reverse the.
So the first thought is, Adobe Flash usage really is going down. So I think I saw a chart that showed a couple years ago it was like 80% of systems, like laptops and workstations, had Flash installed, and I think it's down to about 8%. So usage of it is declined pretty significantly. The second thought there is, the payload that was on VirusTotal, the Excel document that had the embedded Flash object in it. All you needed for the exploit actually wasn't in the document. It actually reached out and called out to an external site that was serving up active content, and so that the full exploit wouldn't be delivered unless it could actually successfully reach out. And so, none of those sites once it was published on VirusTotal were taken down, and so that's at least half of the equation as to why, at least when it was first publicized. And then the second half is, I'm actually surprised that once it's pretty common that once a vendor comes out with a patch for something, that they'll that people can reverse engineer what the exploit is and then use it, and we haven't seen that either. So if anybody finds one, let us know.
Hashtag state of the hack. Actually, just send us something directly too, because we've been looking for it and
we haven't seen it.
Yeah. That's one of the things with the 37 activity as well. We deal with kind of our product telemetry, and we're out there looking for it, and we'll keep people updated on what we see. So I mentioned 14 was kind of the magic number. So in addition to the CVEs, quickly, like there's 14 custom malware families. There's a chart in the report showing those. I think people asked about does the color mean different things? I don't think it's worth reading too much into it, other than the amount of custom malware that this group makes is indicative of other things like their resourcing and how much effort is being put in this. The other piece is the broadening of their targeting, targeting some private corporations and things like that. Well, that's a big part of why we upgraded.
Well, I think it's pretty common in terms of like nation states for you to see them target government on government first, and then from government on government to military or like defense contractors, and then to maybe, if they're going to target commercial interests, more regionally focused interests, and then from there expand out. And so we're starting to see them kind of broaden with a similar pattern there in terms of behavior. When it comes to all the custom malware, some groups are use only really publicly available frameworks and attack toolkits. Others use all private or custom tools. Obviously, custom tools have the advantage in that they can be a lot more stealthy potentially because they may not be known, but it takes actually a fair amount of resources to develop those, maintain them, update them over time. And so, especially if you're developing 14 different sets of backdoor, et cetera, there's a decent amount of resourcing behind that. I guess the counterpoint to that is if you're developing custom backdoors, it's easier for organizations to potentially figure out who's behind it or attribute the activity if only one specific group has access to those private tools.
I'm just stuck on the 14 custom malware families because it brings me to what a lot of people seem to talk about on Twitter, and it's a little bit closely tied with what we work on with focusing on like resilient detections and obviously protecting our customers, but like the MITRE attack matrix, maybe fodder for future discussion, or we can chat about that. But I'd be curious, I think it's a great resource, and I think they link to a lot of our material, a lot of other awesome material out there. But I'm curious, how you'd run an APT37 detection simulation if you are looking at Flash 0 days or other exploits followed by an array of custom malware that's constantly updated. So I think those are such cool efforts, and making it accessible in kind of a wiki format is pretty neat, but sometimes get a little bit concerned about the recreation of attacker activity that I see, not even by the within the attack matrix, but by a lot of people, I think, borrowing those things. They're saying, hey, I'm protected against this APT numbered group, and I often sit here and say, like, oh, I know that group pretty well. Like, I don't think that's exactly, that's the published information on it, but maybe a sensitive topic for a future show.
Yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
A topic for a future one, yeah. Certainly some thoughts there.
Perfect. So, yeah, at this point, I'm updating over here, looking for if people have questions or feedback. I'm getting several trolls from coworkers, so got you.
Thank you.
That's what happens when you do that internally, so salute. So we did want to talk about free stuff. FireEye has free stuff. We've been trying to get better about it. It's really all the individuals that have been pushing this stuff out. So there's a lot of tools on our blog, in addition to kind of the legacy kind of freeware releases that we do.
Right.
There's
Yeah,
featured open source
Right.
stuff on our blog a lot,
Yeah,
and we wanted to recap some of that.
Yeah, oftentimes what we will see is that we'll develop something, a tool or something else for an internal purpose, and then we decide that we want to make it available for others because we're often trying to solve a particular, IR or red team problem or something else. And so if we're having that problem, other people probably are too. And so we can take the work that we're doing and have other people make use of it, and that's great.
Sweet. And maybe in the future we'll have people kind of chat about those on this format or something similar. But just a quick rundown from the more recent releases for the last month or so. We have Real Fish from some of the Mandiant red teamers from Pan Chan and Trevor Haskell. And this was kind of cool because it was based on the idea of attackers bypassing MFA. We've seen APT29 bypass multi-factor authentication in a sort of interesting way with some older accounts registering new devices. We've seen APT28 with the OAuth abuse.
Right. That was, especially with the presidential campaign last year, was pretty prevalent, or at least, a brand new technique that we'd never seen before in terms of how you could get around, two-factor if you registered a new application, say in Google or any of the cloud providers, and then, once you grant that application access to your email account or documents, then the attacker can bypass your two-factor because they have an API key at that point.
Yep. And you may or may not see some other tools in that area. Hopefully, Doug Beanstalk is able to release his tool coming up to assist with that.
On the Real Fish side, though, I guess the key point is, more and more companies are implementing, two-factor or multi-factor authentication, especially on their external perimeter assets. And it's great. It's just not a panacea, right? It's not going to. So where Real Fish comes into play is if an organization does have multi-factor, it can help you basically set up your own landing page where the user may enter their creds and their one-time password that they think they're entering, and then you can leverage it from red team perspective so that you can log into a resource that's behind multi-factor authentication by kind of duping the user into thinking they're logging into a legitimate resource. So that's the goal and what it tries to help emulate from our red team perspective.
Sweet. So a lot of this is field tested,
Yep.
driven by engagements, and then we use them on red teams. Another one was Go Crack by Chris Schmidt. So it's a managed password cracking tool to manage password cracking tasks in a distributed nature across a bunch of GPUs for your red team. That's on the blog. I want to move quickly because I think we're low on time. Simplify Graph. I'll move quickly on this one because Jay Smith wrote it, and he's way smarter than the present company and everyone in the room. But it's a new plugin for IDA Pro users. It placed like third place in the HexRays 2017 contest. So that's up on the blog, available for you. I guess automation and visualization for the graph view.
Yep. In IDA Pro, yeah.
Yep. And then did you want to talk about PyWin Trace? I know that's a little bit older, but that's pretty closely tied to what you do in your role.
Yeah, Anthony Berglund and Kevin Boyd put this one together, but basically it's a Python wrapper for ETW. So that way, we're experimenting and figuring out how we can use event tracing for Windows to generate events on Windows systems for our agent-based software, get better or different visibility into the system without having to use a driver or something else. And so we're working on trying to incorporate that information or those capabilities into our shipping product, FireEye Endpoint Security, and we released a free tool that's kind of a precursor to that. So if you want to use Python to basically figure out, because there's so many different ETW providers, even figuring out which ones they have, et cetera, can be a challenge. So it's meant to basically help people with that with pure Python bindings. Sweet.
Well, other things that we didn't get to that we maybe were going to, we'll hit these up maybe next time. Some groups that have been back. So we responded to kind of a larger APT20 campaign targeting service providers.
Actually, well, a bunch of different service providers,
yes,
and then using those service providers to target their customers. So APT20, which is a Chinese nation state backed group, has been pretty active recently. We had a community protection event last month about that.
Yes, and APT 32, if you guys are watching, I think it's on brand for me to mention APT 32. They're back as well a little bit with their multi-stage shenanigans and maybe some new backdoor variants, and targeting private corporations, it seems, again. So those are things we didn't quite get to cover today, but I see our timer here, and I see the trolls coming in, and we'll follow up with people if you see anything there to respond to.
Let me see if there's any good ones. I know we're short on time, so. I see a good one. That's actually a really good one for next time. Are you familiar with best practices for kicking an APT group off your network? I actually wrote a blog post about this probably like 7 years ago now. It was called Avoid the Knee-Jerk Reaction. I think I have newer thoughts now on that in terms of like how to best respond. I think there's a lot of different approaches you can take in terms of like the big bang approach in terms of investigate fully and then remove everything or take a more targeted approach. And what you do depends on a lot of different factors. So I think we'll probably cover that one. That one maybe that would be a good one for next time.
Yeah, again, hopefully we can get people from other offices, but in this office we have Matthew McWhirt and Derek Coulson who work on architecting these large-scale remediations for some of these big events and talk about remediating in the strike zone. Maybe it's a part of what we're doing here. Maybe it's a separate video or something. But those guys have some awesome thoughts, as do people kind of globally at the company. So that's it from us. We good. You got fancy graphics. I'm going to put, is my name here? No? I'll put the, I want to thank, though, Helena and Jenny on our social media team for setting this stuff up. We knew it would look good content-wise. That's on Glyer and I. Yeah. We didn't really put much together, a couple bullet points. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know what you want to see in the future, and we'll try to take it maybe as a traveling road show, various places or something.
Hopefully we'll see you next month.
Yeah, there you go.